Alright, hello, welcome back to another episode of Star Wars Mark of Balance. My name is Mark, and today I'm going to be giving you another one of my top fives in something that is near and dear to not only my heart, but Star Wars and non-Star Wars fans alike. Star Wars video games. This is a really exciting topic because I know Star Wars video games mean so much to people and their childhoods, and this topic usually gets the most interactions on my Instagram when I post about it. Go follow that if you don't, at star_wars_mark of balance. So this interaction should be really fun, hearing from you guys about what your top five is and what these games really mean to you if I do bring them up in this episode. Now, the main reason I wanted to do this topic is because we've gotten so much Star Wars video game news lately from Respawn Entertainment, the makers of Jedi Fallen Order, announcing that they will be working on three Star Wars projects as of right now. We think a Star Wars Fallen Order sequel, a real-time strategy game like Empire at War back in the day, and a first-person shooter. God, I am praying it is a sequel to a game I may or may not mention in this top 5 list. We also finally have a release date for LEGO Star Wars The Skywalker Saga, April 5th, only a month away. Looking to be the greatest LEGO video game ever created, open world, multiple planets, thousands of characters. It's going to be awesome. We're getting a Knights of the Old Republic remake, which we only got a teaser for, but being one of the greatest, if not the greatest Star Wars video game ever created story-wise, that's really a monumental announcement, and when that game releases, a lot of people that weren't able to play or couldn't get into the old gameplay are going to be introduced to this rich, deep story that so many people have loved for so long. And finally, while there is some controversy surrounding Star Wars Eclipse and its developers regarding the homophobic comments made by the CEO of the company and some other past issues within the company, the trailer itself looked like one of the best trailers in Star Wars. It's taking place in the High Republic, which I've just finished my first High Republic book, and it looks like an amazing universe with a lot of great characters to dive into. And if it was able to be put in this story-driven Star Wars game format, it could really be something special. So hopefully the developer can get their shit together and go under some new management to get that game finished off with the right people in the right places. Just a little update, since recording this, Star Wars Eclipse has now been delayed till 2027 to 2028, which is a fancy way of saying this game is doomed, it is canceled. So everything I just said, basically off the table. And hopefully they come up with a new Star Wars High Republic game that is developed by someone else, obviously someone with less issues within their management, so maybe this is a blessing in disguise, but Star Wars Eclipse is not happening. Don't even get your hopes up. 2027, 2028 is ridiculous, and back to the original episode. I also want to acknowledge people that might be listening that aren't really into video games and haven't played Star Wars video games. I hope you can still find some interest in this episode because I will be kind of diving into why some video games work and kind of the background behind these things. So even if you haven't played them, I think you'll still be interested to hear about why I enjoy them, why they have such a great impact on the Star Wars community, even outside video games. You know, a lot of these video games I might mention have references in some of the shows and movies that you really love. So it'll be cool to make those connections even if you aren't into video games. I just wanted to acknowledge that part of my great audience. Now, of course, here at Mark of Balance, I like to be as objective and holistic as possible, even when I do these personal ranking lists. So while these will be personal choices of mine, I will be taking into account nostalgia factors clouding my judgment, as the dark side does, and overall I want to pick the games that I believe deliver the best package as a whole, while also holding a special place in my heart and holding up after all these years, which will be a really important factor to me. Because some of these games have come out 10, 15 plus years ago. And as a disclaimer, of course, I have not played every single Star Wars video game ever made, so I might be leaving some of your favorites off this list. Knights of the Old Republic. I tried to play it, guys. I'm so sorry. That combat just wasn't working for me, but when the remake comes out, I will be the first to play it. I promise, and I will review it, and you guys can all get off my back. As with every top 5 list, these can change depending on the day. If you're in the mood for one type of video game over another, a first-person shooter over an adventure game, these can change easily, and some of these rankings, I'm talking there is a hair difference between. I mean, like the 3 and 4 spot and the 1 and 2 spot, I mean, it is so close. And even if I rank them the way I do, which you'll hear about later, I definitely want to stress that that could easily change by tomorrow. But making these lists is a lot of fun, so I wanted to do it anyway. One last thing, I think Star Wars games have yet to reach their pinnacle. I think just like the TV shows, there's so much potential. There's so much more potential. And even though what we've been given has been great to amazing, I believe there is still room out there for perfection, which I think in this next wave of Star Wars video games might be on the horizon. So really exciting stuff. And let's take a look back and give you my top 5 Star Wars video games. At number 5, I have a crowd pleaser classic that regardless if you are a Star Wars fan, if you're not a Star Wars fan, if you're a casual Star Wars fan, if you're a hardcore Star Wars fan, everyone can enjoy it. Co-op, single player, any way you play it is always a good family time, and that is Lego Star Wars The Complete Saga. The Complete Saga was the third Star Wars Lego game to release after the original one, which the original one was the prequel films, and then the sequel one was the original films, which is kind of weird, but it basically combines those two games, so you get all 6 films into one video game, and that's what makes it just the whole package. So you get to enjoy all 6 films in any order you want, and with such a large collection of characters from both eras, it really felt like the first time, early on that both eras had come together to be enjoyed all at once, because I believe, when this came out, there might have still been some separation between the two eras of Star Wars where the old community didn't really love the prequels and the prequels really enjoyed theirs and were always defending it. And I feel like this was the really first celebration of those coming together, aside from, DVD box sets or something like that. Lego games, of course, shine and are best played with friends and family. And I have so many great memories of playing this with my sister Jen on Saturday mornings, and specifically getting mad when she would take a ridiculously long time collecting every single stud in entire region when I just wanted to get to the next area. And we definitely had some arguments, some fights about wanting to move on and her wanting to stay there. And I don't know if you guys remember, but in the original games, if the two players ran to the opposite sides of the screen, the whole experience would just kind of come to a standstill and nothing would move and the screen would just be in a deadlock. And a lot of frustration was had there. No one wanted to move the screen. No one wanted to give an inch. But overall, great times, huh? It's funny what you remember. And usually that was the stuff that used to be the stuff that pissed you off the most. And now it's one of the good memories of playing the game with my sister. But she has the last laugh, though, because now in video games, I literally collect everything in an area before I move on. So I've become what I swore to destroy back in the day, as all great Star Wars would say. Of course, collecting the mini kits to deck out the home world of Mos Eisley with all the awesome ships that you can build, and the replayability that builds into the design of the game because you had to go back and free play and use all of the funny and amazing characters to unlock all the puzzles to get up to mini kits that you couldn't reach in your first playthrough. So that was a great way to integrate replayability into the game aside from playing with friends and family. Going back to get those gold bricks, which I think to this day I still don't know what they exactly do, but that was also a great part of the experience. Becoming a true Jedi and completing that stud goal at the top of the screen and getting that over-the-top sound effect like, and it's like, yes. But then getting to spend all those studs on super crazy bonuses, like I think there was an invincibility one, like a triple jump one. I kind of forget because I haven't played this game in probably 10 years, but going to the bar and buying those upgrades or different characters for millions of studs was always so satisfying after sinking so many hours into it. So yeah, we have family fun, great couch game to play with friends, replayability, player choice to play any way you want in any era you want to start or finish, some bonus content, minifigs, all make this a great little package that deserves and needs to be in every self-respecting Star Wars fan's top 5 video game list. The only complaint I can have about this game is the simplicity of it. The combat, extremely simple, not much difficulty, not much penalization for dying or falling off the edge. The checkpoints are super easy, but it's a family game, so I can't really hold it to that. I will be going into some of my criticisms of all these games as I go on, but that's really my only criticism for this game as of right now at number 5. But it's the definitive LEGO Star Wars experience until Lego Star Wars The Skywalker Saga comes out next month, that looks like it's going to replace this game on my top 5 list if it's as good as it seems, which I don't see why it wouldn't be. But for now, the complete saga is the best Lego Star Wars experience, and that is why it is at my number 5. So at number 4, I have a game that was recently re-released. So I was able to play it very recently, so it's very fresh in my mind. And thank God they did re-release it, because Republic Commando still holds up to this day as a fantastic first-person shooter and still the most badass Star Wars video game, period. The re-release didn't do much to really beef up the graphics and gameplay, but just having the opportunity to play it on a next-gen console was awesome. The first thing I think about when I think of Republic Commando, and this might be a deep-cut memory, but do you remember those DVDs that used to have extra content on them, like games or trailers for upcoming stuff? Well, I specifically remember the trailer for this game being included in the original, 2D Clone Wars DVDs. And I would always watch this trailer constantly, before or after watching the Clone Wars 2D movie. I forget if it was in the first one or the second one, but regardless, the trailer was so different for Star Wars at the time. It was grimy, violent, even scary, to be honest. And the music was like heavy metal. It was a music video for a heavy metal band song. And I was hooked to it. And I said, I have to play this, even as a kid. And it's because at that time, the clones were the most cool part of Star Wars. And being able to play as basically a space Navy SEAL was something I just had to do. Do yourself a favor, if you don't know what I'm talking about right now, go back and rewatch the announcement trailer for this game. It's incredible. Before I start, I'm a score guy, and the main menu to this game greets you with this infectious monk voice kind of melody and these marching drums in the background. It's an awesome piece. I think it's called Vode something, but it sets the tone right away, and it still gets me going to this day. So for these bigger games, I'm going to dive a little bit deeper in than I did with Lego Star Wars, but these have so much more to them that I want to talk about. So let's talk about the art direction for this game, because like I said, it was so different from what we were used to. I think it was a deliberate decision to exaggerate enemy types and make them look as menacing as possible, and even changing some designs, like the basic battle droid being gray with red eyes instead of that beige screw eyes kind of thing. I don't know how to describe their eyes, but yeah. I know the team mentioned in their behind-the-scenes commentary that they really wanted to drive home the idea that the war from the perspective of the Special Forces team is going to be a lot different than what the Jedi experience. Environments were a lot more intense, with almost a layer of dirt being present on everything, from the clones to the droids to the enemies to the walls itself. It was all just very grimy, like I said. Nothing was clean and shiny like Kamino or Coruscant, and that just kind of added to the tone of the game, because you start on the nice white shiny facilities of Kamino. The characters were another key to this game being so fun. The 4-man team is pretty archetypal, with you have the stoic leader, Boss 3-7, the sarcastic funny guy, Scorch 6-2, the badass Sev 07, and Fixer 4-0, the follow orders type of guy. They all surprisingly play off each other well, and even the serious characters like Boss and Fixer have their comedic moments, which really adds to the levity of the intense situations they're in. Tamara Morrison plays Boss perfectly, and just a shout out to him for always giving his all to the Star Wars universe. We just had Book of Boba Fett, and even though the reviews are mixed, I so appreciate his contributions to Star Wars itself. So another great performance by him. The comlink chatter throughout the game, even when you aren't all together, just really solidifies the bond between the characters. It makes the whole squad dynamic feel authentic. You want to look out for these guys. You want to fight alongside them. You want to keep each other alive. And that directly ties into the gameplay, because you're relying on these guys to revive you, give you cover, or inevitably just take down a big tough enemy you can't do on your own. It all really comes together beautifully. Gameplay-wise, the gunplay is tight. Surprisingly, still really plays well, even 15 years later. The fact that your gun disassembles into so many different weapons, like a sniper or grenade launcher, is just so cool, and the animation for it never gets old. Enemy weapons are also super unique to each faction, with the Trandoshans having more kinetic weapons, like bullet miniguns or shotguns, while Geonosians have weapons that almost look kind of alive, like their beam rifle, which has spider hands, which is really weird and kind of creepy when you're holding it, but it makes sense because they're bugs, Enemy variety is fantastic, always making you shift your tactics and approach to every situation, because Geonosians can swarm and fly while having a lot of health. Trandoshans like to overwhelm you with close range attacks, so you have to keep them at bay. Droids do a bit of everything with fodder like the battle droids, and then those goddamn super battle droids that you'd think were made out of Beskar armor in the game. They do not go down. Some encounters were truly difficult to get through, which forced you to try different strategies and team positioning to get that perfect run through. When it all comes together and you get all the weapons at your disposal, you've memorized all the command buttons, and you know which positions to put which squad members in to take down different enemies, it becomes some of the most satisfying Star Wars gameplay out there. Some other notes, as I briefly mentioned, I love the horror elements in this game, especially the abandoned Star Cruiser level, where everyone is dead and you and your squad are split up because you infiltrate it to find out what's going on. And when you do finally find out what happened, it's really sweet. I need some more Star Wars horror in my life. So I do want to talk about some negatives because this is a holistic list. But going through a second playthrough, there were some glaring issues with the AI, enemy difficulty, the story, and weapon feel, even though I love the weapon. But I'll talk about that. I'll start with the story, which overall I think is good, and each mission feels like it leads into the next one, but it just kind of ends on an unresolved cliffhanger and feels abrupt. Still waiting on that sequel that I mentioned in the intro to find out what happened to our boy, Sev 07. The AI issue for your squad members is slightly passable because it is an older game, but man, sometimes those guys are morons and either just don't pick you up or try and pick you up in the middle of action and don't try and take cover. One time, I watched my whole squad just get gunned down one by one as they all just tried to stand in the middle of open fire to pick me up. Another time, one of my guys got stuck on a bush in the previous room, and I couldn't advance with the 3-man squad because it was like the last mission, so I'd just get massacred. So I had to restart the mission or the last checkpoint. I forget what I had to do, but it was just a little annoying. But I think the biggest problem with Republic Commando is the difficulty. And not because I don't like difficulty. I think when difficulty is done right, it's super rewarding. But in some aspects, the difficulty is not tuned correctly, and in some points, it's kind of unfair. I think before Fallen Order, and even now, this still might be one of the more difficult Star Wars games out there. I know Troy, a friend of the podcast, still hasn't beaten this game. He bought the remastered or re-released version, and he still didn't finish it. Enemies are complete bullet sponges with the super battle droids, as I mentioned, literally being impossible to kill by yourself unless you have a surplus of grenades or distance weapons, because you can't get close to them. Geonosians that fly have lasers that literally rip through your entire squad so fast, and they take a ridiculous amount of damage. So like I said, making it through these sections and encounters are extremely satisfying, but it's glaring that there's balancing issues that sometimes make things just unfun. Lastly, like I said, I love the gunplay. It's tight, it's good, it's well made, but sometimes the pistol and the assault rifle can feel like you're shooting marshmallows. The bolts don't really have any weight behind them, and you can really just put a bunch of bullets into a little super battle droid or a little battle droid. He won't move, and then he'll just explode. So you don't feel like you're hitting him with anything crazy like a hot piece of laser. So that was just a little unsatisfying. But once again, this is an older game, and it does not take away from the experience at all. Overall, this game is so fun, so unique, and I cannot believe we don't have more Star Wars first-person shooters like this in the catalog, because it's such a cult classic, and it's such a no-brainer. It's probably frickin' EA. They're the worst company on earth, and I'll go into that a little more later. But I pray to God every day that we do get a sequel to this, or at least a game similar to this very soon, and I do think it's coming. Lastly, it's iconic. The characters and the Commando armor have made their way into the canon of Star Wars through Clone Wars. We actually see the Republic Commandos for literally the briefest second in the Clone Wars. I can't believe they just teased us like that and didn't show us a whole episode, but they were canonized in Star Wars. The weapon that they use in Republic Commando is now being used by Wrecker in Bad Batch. We see Scorch in Bad Batch, of course, not on the right side, but he's in it. Gregor gets a whole arc in Clone Wars, so this has very much influenced today's Star Wars, which is really cool to see. And I'll just say this, if some of these issues might have been resolved that I just mentioned, it might have made its way higher than number 4 on the list, but for now, it's at number 4. Moving on to number 3, we have one of the most recent Star Wars games to come out, and it did not disappoint like many of the ones that came before it and followed it, and that is Jedi Fallen Order. This game exceeded so many expectations. Coming from EA, which at this point is just one of the worst gaming companies, if not the worst company on planet Earth, who basically committed to not doing single-player games for Star Wars because they just wanted to be the money-grubbing losers that they are and wanted to only make live service multiplayer games. When they finally did promise a single-player story-driven Star Wars game, it seemed like a fantasy until it literally physically came out. I didn't even believe it was going to come out until it actually came out. And the game ended up nailing it. It was the strongest opening they could have had for a single-player EA-produced game. Shout out to Respawn for being the light in EA's company. I'd say 60 to 75% of the reason that this game is ranked so highly for me at least, and for many others, is just how simply fantastic the story is. It perfectly incorporates fresh ideas around a brand new set of characters while also still sticking to the core themes of Star Wars. It brings in plenty of Easter eggs for people who kept up with all the TV shows and canon up to that point, while also being accessible to the casual fan or outsider. I still think the idea of the Zepho, this ancient alien race, being the backbone of the story was such a well thought out and welcome addition to the universe. The main character Cal is such a awesome Star Wars protagonist and is instantly likable with his caring nature towards others, his traumatic past that he's still wrestling with to this day, and his incredible flowing red hair. The cast that surround him is just as well rounded, with Seer and Trilla being this failed master and apprentice relationship that we see time and time again. Trilla is the perfect mirror of what Cal could have become and acts as his foil throughout the story. It also gives Seer a chance to redeem herself and connect once again to the Force that she did cut herself off from, as all great Jedi do. Grease is an excellent comedic relief, but also has some generally heartfelt moments with Cal that make you really connect with him. BD-1 is the king of droids, and I love him. His sound effects were so reminiscent of R2 while also having his own flavor to them. And he even has this deep backstory of being lost and losing his master before finding Cal, and, seeing losing his master as a failure, as this small little droid. It was really incredible when you saw that moment with them. Even though Marin, the Night Sister, the sole surviving Night Sister, didn't become a deeper character until late in the game, it was awesome to see someone in a similar situation as Cal, losing their kind after being hunted down and being one of the only survivors. Malicos is this mini antagonist you get on Dathomir, who's super sketchy and scary throughout until he finally reveals himself as this fallen Jedi. And he's another great foil for Cal, a Jedi who survived and lost his way, but did still speak some truth about the Jedi and their failures in the past. I can go on and on about how well each character is written and how they perfectly enhance the story and Cal's character, but I gotta keep it short. This story truly made me optimistic that there are storytellers out there that can tell beautifully crafted Star Wars stories that are grounded in the themes from the past that make this franchise resonate for so many people. A story about loss, personal growth, sacrifice, fear, and of course, hope. Some of my favorite gaming moments in recent memory come from this story. Getting to go to Ilum to create a lightsaber was a dream come true, and having a hand in that process. This moment was only heightened with BD's backstory being revealed. Darth Vader's entrance at the end was chilling. I love the respect that they gave to his character and emphasized that he is in a whole other league at this point in time. I even like the ending of them trusting in the Force to find Padawans to rebuild the Order, instead of making the same mistake of the previous Jedi Order of ripping children from their family because the Jedi knew they were Force sensitive. It's a great evolution to the Order for this next generation. But of course, the one moment I wanted and would uninstall the game if I didn't get or it didn't do it justice was the Order 66 scene. I said I wanted an Order 66 flashback with Anakin's betrayal playing every day until this game came out. And when I got it, I was playing with tears in my eyes. Experiencing Order 66 finally from a first-hand perspective with this iconic soundtrack playing and Cal going through this traumatic event and losing his master in his arms is everything I wanted and more. One of my favorite gaming moments ever, period. Having the main menu kind of foreshadow that story was also really cool. Gameplay-wise, I think the lightsaber combat was the best yet, with parrying and dodging combined with force powers feeling so satisfying, but also very grounded and not overpowered. The Souls-like death system was a bold move, Cotton, but it paid off. Because this is such a large fan base, this could have cut the player base in half and made a lot of people discouraged from playing, but I think they included it really well by making the game challenging and also making you earn everything, but also allowing less experienced players to eventually build up and feel that satisfaction as well. The enemy variety also keeps you on your toes and makes you adjust styles consistently with animals, human enemies, mech enemies. It was all very different and varied. I think the exploration for the most part is a plus, and I enjoyed the whole Force Echo moments as well as finding some customizable things, but exploration for me plays a factor into the negatives I have with this game, which I'll discuss a little later, but I must say the first playthrough with exploration was very fun. As I said at the start of this section, and this might be a controversial opinion, but I think story really carries this game. Like I said, combat is good, it's fun, it's the best lightsaber combat yet, but I believe the story really allows for this game to have a good amount of shortcomings that get overlooked. Some were present in the first playthrough, but I think the others really became more apparent in my second playthrough that actually forced me not want to complete the second playthrough overall. I think the exploration the first time through was satisfying. But as you got deeper into the game, and then of course when you have a second playthrough, two issues really popped up for me. One, some of the puzzles were very tedious the first time through, and then having to do them again was just not fun. And I'd rather just have a straightforward path than be hindered by like a damn rolling ball puzzle in the Zepho tomb. I mean, come on, can we all agree no one liked that? And number two, the exploration sometimes wasn't rewarding enough for the effort. Of course, the first time through, you don't exactly know what you're looking for, so when you do find these things, it's really exciting. And when you'd find the lightsaber hilts, the lightsaber color, the ship paint jobs, and some of the outfits, that was really fun. But as you got deeper into the game, you realized it was just an endless sea of ponchos, and it was such a bummer. Did I really want to scale a whole thing that was so far away from the save point with the chance of dying and having to restart if I knew at the end all I'd get was a yellow space poncho? No. This issue compounds because then the second playthrough, some of these same puzzles arise and you don't really need to explore anymore. But you have to do some of the exploring to rank up your force ability. So you see what I'm saying? Like the second time you go through, it's not as fun because you're more forced to do the exploration than you want to do, if that makes sense. I wish in my second playthrough I could just go through with all the stuff I already had force ability wise. But I know the force abilities coming to Cal is kind of part of the story, so it kind of, pulls back and forth on that. But overall, it made my second playthrough a slog. But I must say, that might just be me, because I've never been a fan of the retread gameplay tactic where you have to go back to the same spots again and go through with new powers. It's never really been my cup of tea, or, you have to wait to get something and then come back. Overall, this is a big negative, but like I said, the story was so good, and I played through the first time in ignorance of the poncho onslaught that was waiting for me, that I let it slide, honestly. Another general issue is the game performance at some points was pretty bad. I mean, on Kashyyyk, I would literally get 10-second loading screens where my game would freeze when I'd go into like a new big area, and textures would like constantly pop in, so it wasn't as polished as it should have been. But once again, I think the story gave a lot of people a reason to give it that pass. And this is EA we're talking about, so the fact that they put together a cohesive single-player story game and allowed it to happen, I think everyone was just like, fine, whatever, it's good, it's great, fine. To close, I think Fallen Order is a perfect building block game, and I very much expect the sequel to correct all of these issues and take a beautiful spot in my top 5 list in the future. It will be hard to top the story of the first one, but I think if the gameplay and cutting out some of the tedious puzzles could be corrected, that would make up for any shortcomings in the story and bring it up to a really amazing level. I honestly see Fallen Order as a test run in many aspects, and with a test run game coming in at number 3 on my all-time list of Star Wars games, that says some things. I feel like I was very critical on this game for a number 3 spot, but we do have to remember that this is the longest and largest game of all of the ones on this list, so there are many more opportunities for critique than a family game or 6-hour first-person shooter, so keep that in mind. But Fallen Order is one of the best Star Wars stories told, and I only expect this franchise and IP to go up and put all the pieces together in the next game to create a true classic. Now, number 1 and number 2 were back and forth, and the decision I ultimately made did kill me. There's a little part of me inside that is dead, and I might need to get it checked out. But I truly believe it is the right decision for me. Number 2, I have the original Star Wars Battlefront 2. This game needs no introduction. Star Wars fans or not, this is on everyone's favorite childhood games list, and is probably on people's all-time list. This game did so many things right. From the amount of content, remember when games released full of content at launch, The simplistic but surprisingly impactful story, the game modes, and just the unmatchable ability to play with friends. First of all, shout out to Battlefront 1. You were incredible as well, and you definitely get overshadowed by this one a lot, but I enjoyed you very much too. So let's talk about the content. This game had 24 maps. 24. And they were all pretty much bangers. No era was overpowered by the other. Hot on the edge of Revenge of the Sith, we had awesome sprawling maps like Utapau, epic close quarters of the Jedi Temple, and of course the super interactive Mustafar map. But other deep cut locations showed up like Maigito that only got 2 seconds of screen time for our boy Ki-Adi-Mundi to get Order 66 in Revenge of the Sith. And that map ended up turning into one of my favorites. Also, they had a map on that asteroid base that I think was at the end of Revenge of the Sith where Padme gives birth. That's a super deep cut that would never happen in games today. Felucia looked incredible for 2005 with all the vibrant colors and the horrifying green monsters from the Geonosis arena. Kashyyyk had this D-Day-like beach battle location with that huge wall. Other prequel locations like Naboo and Geonosis were classic staples. The original trilogy was so well represented with the Tauntaun 4, all-white interior, transporting me into that opening scene of A New Hope. Hoth and Endor looked great, of course, with their massive sandboxes. Mos Eisley being the Rust of Star Wars. Heroes vs. villains there was where you went to settle beef. Bespin was my personal favorite because of the verticality and all the choke points that just gave so many unique gameplay memories and moments. And these are just the ground maps. Of course, the space maps didn't really change, just the ships. But the ships changing added so much to the factions because they perfectly reflected them. Flying in on a gunship and having people spawn on you and destroying a ship from the inside was just peak gaming. But also you had the option of blowing up all the important systems from the outside. You could also stay in your ship and defend it from intruders. You could also man turrets on your ship and defend the vital systems. The gameplay choice on these simple maps was so impressive and the reason this game could be played endlessly. Map-wise, this game is the gold standard. Content-wise, I really stuck to instant action and capturing command posts. I'm sorry, I couldn't find the sound effect for them screaming, "We've captured another command post." But the voice acting in the game is incredible. I love the call-outs from the announcers and your commanding officers for all the factions. They're so over the top, they're so ridiculous, so much fun. But the thing that me and my friends would play the most, shout out to Peter and Troy, was Galactic Conquest. Being able to command troop movements and conduct ground battles to take over planets owned by other factions, going into space battles when your two flagships meet over a planet, buying upgrades like reinforcements, heavy armor, or access to a hero, added so many layers of strategy to this mode. Did you commit too much too early, and later on you're at a disadvantage? Do you use it to take a crucial system in the middle of the galaxy map? Did you love Hoth so much that you defend it with your honor and pour all resources to keep it safe? All of these were important questions when playing Galactic Conquest. A well-crafted game mode that you could sink hours into one campaign and play it a totally different way the next time around. Let's talk about the story, which once again, shout out to Tamara Morrison, who brought these soldier audio logs to life and made me feel like I was watching a Band of Brothers episode, Star Wars edition. I think the story is such a simple idea, but it is really all it has to be with these huge Star Wars games. Put me in the shoes of a soldier in these iconic battles that we know about and give me one story thread to follow and hold on to. In this case, it's the infamous 501st Legion. I like that they picked one Legion to give the story consistency and the illusion that you are fighting with the same guys. The campaign spans from Geonosis in the beginning all the way into the Imperial Age. So it's really cool to see these soldiers turn from clones to Imperials. These audio logs are basically journal entries, and it gives it a real boots-on-the-ground feel. The music choice, of course, adds another layer to the drama of these logs and the action from the finest of John Williams. These logs did a lot more for clones than what we got in the movies. It added depth to the clones that we, of course, wouldn't see till later on in the Clone Wars. I mean, you really felt for them. Of course, at this point in canon, they knew about Order 66 the whole time, and they were just waiting for the Order. But it makes their interactions with the Jedi kind of heartbreaking when you hear them described in these audio logs. Specifically after the Felucia mission, the log says, Aayla Secura said we were the bravest soldiers he had ever fought with. And then he says, good thing we had our helmets on, because we couldn't bear to look her in the eye. I mean, geez, so effective. And of course, as you get closer to Order 66, the tension begins to be wound up. And then comes one of my favorite moments in gaming, period. The Jedi Temple Assault and audio log, Nightfall. So this was another thing where you got to experience Order 66 firsthand. So I kind of lied before. So I'm just getting chills thinking of this, but let me read the script for this. And my best Tamara Morrison impression. What I remember about the rise of the Empire was how quiet it was. During the waning hours of the Clone Wars, the 501st Legion was discreetly transferred back to Coruscant. It was a silent trip. We all knew it was about to happen, what we were about to do. Did we have any doubts? Any private, treacherous thoughts? Perhaps, but no one said a word. Not on the flight to Coruscant, not when Order 66 came down, and not when we marched into the Jedi Temple. Not a word. I mean, Jesus Christ. And shout out to me for that impression. If Clone Wars never came out, these audio logs would have left me feeling fulfilled. Story did exactly what it needed to do, and I much prefer this over the convoluted original story that they tried to force into Battlefront 2. This game did so many things right and earns the title of a classic. Of course, this game shows its age, came out in 2005. Maps are pretty bare bones, AI stands still for you to shoot, and the nostalgia factor of this is definitely through the roof. But for what it did to gaming, for what it means to people, I can't really fault it for its shortcomings. I would love to know how many hours I've sunk into this game, with and without friends, but I'd say it's in the upper hundreds, dare I say thousands, I don't know. But it is an unmistakable Star Wars experience and well-deserving of the number 2 spot. And man, is it close to being number 1. Before I give my number 1, I gotta do honorable mentions because there are so many great Star Wars video games out there. And I'm sure many of you are surprised I did not include the Revenge of the Sith game in this list. I'm sorry, spoiler, it's not number 1. But I played it recently, and the nostalgia goggles were super on when I thought back on this game. For a movie adaptation game, it's passable. It's still fun. The combat is still fun, but it very much does not hold up. And it basically just does retell the story of Revenge of the Sith. But I know people love it, and I love it too for what it gave me at the time, so it is going to stay as an honorable mention. Another honorable mention, which at one point was one of the worst Star Wars games ever created in Star Wars Battlefront 2, the modern one. But after years of fixes and DICE turning it around, in the state that it's in now, Star Wars Battlefront 2, 2017, is a fantastic first-person multiplayer shooter. The graphics are second to none still by today's standards. And it's that game I always go back to if I just want to play a mindless shooter, and it's so much fun. And the customization has finally got to a good point, so another great honorable mention. The final honorable mention, which might be a deep cut, I don't know how many people have really played this, but Star Wars Empire at War is another great Star Wars video game. It's basically a real-time strategy game where you command troops, so you can command a bunch of Imperial Stormtroopers, a Walker, ATSTs, like, it's a lot of fun, and I really want to see them bring that to the next wave of Star Wars video games and really get to command, clone armies, command space battles. It would be so cool, and with modern technology and gaming systems, it'd be really great. So those are my 3 honorable mentions. I'm sorry, once again, if I have not mentioned your favorite game yet, but I got to get to my number 1. And this is a game that has everything. It has a completely unique story, insanely fun and original combat, satisfying art direction and customization, top-tier voice acting, and on top of all that, it still has that nostalgia factor. But most importantly, it holds up today, playing it 13 or 14 years later. Can you guess what this number 1 game is? I am, of course, talking about Star Wars The Force Unleashed, the story of Darth Vader's secret apprentice, Starkiller. Now, I was so amped up to talk about this game when I started writing this episode that I was like, you know what, I need to replay this. So I did. And when it comes to the story, the nostalgia goggles were definitely on. It definitely starts to unravel later into the game. But the overall package of it is still just amazing. Force lightning someone with both hands is still extremely satisfying. Force gripping an enemy and tossing, rolling, and smashing them into the environment is just as funny as it was back in the day, thanks to the wacky ragdoll physics engine of this game. But there is still one thing that has not been topped in Star Wars gaming, and that is the over-the-top force push. I swear I almost put my circle button through the back of my controller every time I loaded up a huge force push. Seeing the force literally pulse in your hand and then letting out this massive blast that would toss everything in front of it into the next century never gets old. Entire hallways of troops, debris sent flying like they were plastic bags. It's still just as good today. The Force was unleashed in this game. Let's just say that. I also like that the Force abilities aren't given to you all at once. They kind of come to you as you go throughout the game, which was really cool. I mean, I remember the second mission, the first time getting to use Force Lightning on Raxus Prime is like etched into my memory. And it was so fun to use it against the Rhodians and use it to throw lightning bombs of people. It's so much fun and such a great memory. The lightsaber combat is actually a lot deeper than I remembered it. The skill tree of abilities and combos really surprised me. I was like, damn, I've played through this campaign like 10 times back in the day, and I never remembered doing this. Infusing force powers into the lightsaber was such a stroke of genius. Like the baseball bat swing with the force push is undefeated. Fusing lightning into a lightsaber is such a dope idea. I'm surprised we have not seen it pop up more in Star Wars yet. And it kind of makes sense when you think about it. I think the only gripe I have with the combat, which the second game did get right, the only thing the sequel to this game got right, was the lightsaber feel. The Force Unleashed lightsaber feels like a blunt object, not a blade that could literally cut anything in half. It's weighty and really not as satisfying or buttery smooth as this weapon should be. The enemy variety in this game is pretty incredible. I mean, I can't even count how many different unique enemy types there are. Each planet has its own faction. They have their fodder, their special, their brutes, their bosses, like Rancors on Felucia. The Imperials have like 12 different varieties. They have jet troopers, stealth troopers, force-resistant troopers, flame troopers, walkers, mecha troopers, Imperial guards. I mean, I could just keep going. It really created a unique gameplay experience every time you played a different encounter because they could mix and match all these different enemy types. And I loved how a brute in the Felucian army was not the same as a brute in the Rebel faction. So I really appreciate the gameplay variety there. Art direction in this game might even rival Fallen Order in my opinion. All the main planets and environments are so dense with detail, even by today's standards. Felucia is teeming with all sorts of weird life forms to the point where you think the planet itself is alive. Raxus Prime, which I believe makes its way into Clone Wars when Savage goes to find Maul, it's basically just a big rust ball of trash. It's this landfill world with debris flying overhead constantly, tetanus at every turn. I could just keep going about these environments, but they were so well thought out and imaginative. Starkiller's outfits throughout are perfect because they reflect the environment, not just like wearing camo in a forest world or something simple like that. But, you know, on Raxus, for example, he wears this Darth Vader-esque chest monitor. He has these heavily reinforced gloves with this cool wrap around his mouth and nose. In later missions, he begins to become more rebel-like with his attire, and by the end, he just has the full-on like Jedi white and black robe. So I kind of mentioned the transformation aspect of the game, so let's get into the story. First, this story brought Sam Witwer into Star Wars, the voice of Maul in Star Wars Clone Wars and Rebels, and the brother in Clone Wars. Star Wars would simply not be the same without him, and this game made it all possible. We already know he's a fantastic voice actor, but here we really are introduced to that talent. He's surrounded by other great characters like Proxy and our man Darth Vader, who really steals the show in this game. This is like a different side of Vader, him in this master role, and more importantly, like a Sith master role. We see this more manipulative side of Vader that doesn't really get seen a lot in the original trilogy. He's brutal, deceptive, overall just a great take on the character during this time period. Obviously, this story is not canon, everyone. Proxy, Starkiller's droid, is welcome addition among the Star Wars droid catalog with hilarious dialogue and this cool ability to shapeshift into any living being, dead or alive, like Obi-Wan, Maul, or Shakti. Of course, some characters fall short, but I will save that for a little later. The story overall, I think, starts very strong, and I mean really strong. Towards the end, I think it unravels a bit from the beginning of the rebellion, the forced love story at Starkiller doesn't change, but I want to focus on the first 4 or 5 missions, because they really are spectacular. The first mission, you start as Vader. I mean, really cool. I just want to talk about Starkiller's story here, but you start as Vader, and you take out this Jedi Master on Kashyyyk, and he has this son, and the son takes away his lightsaber, and Darth Vader realizes that this son has a great gift for the Force, so he's like, I'm taking you under my wing. So the first 3 missions are Starkiller's first 3 Jedi hunts, and it really plants the seed, in my opinion, for what would later become the Inquisitors. He's basically this Force-sensitive person who goes under Darth Vader's command to kill remaining Jedi from Order 66. And what I love about the first 3 missions is how it gave us a glimpse into how Jedi would react to Order 66. One Jedi you hunt starts his own militia to fight back against the Empire, the military-minded Jedi. One reconstructs the Jedi Temple and Council out of garbage and pretends everyone is still alive, living in constant denial of Order 66 on Raxus Prime. And one, Shaak Ti, returns to her homeworld to protect her people and meditate with the Force. Even if these stories aren't canon, all are the most likely routes that Jedi would take. The military man, the denier, and the exile. Classic Star Wars. And each of them leaves their own impression on Starkiller and teaching him a side of the Jedi he'd never know. Then we get this great twist at the end of these 3 missions, which kind of blew my mind as a kid, when Vader betrays you and kills you in front of Sidious. This is where, while I think it's a really strong moment, the story starts to unravel for me with this modern playthrough that I did recently. The end is still pretty epic with his showdown and sacrifice on the Death Star, but I will talk about what I didn't really like about the story. If you couldn't tell by now, this game has influenced a lot of what we see in Star Wars today, which gives it huge impact points for me. From the concept of Inquisitors to Sam Witwer gracing Star Wars, to the exploration of the start of the rebellion, even the Darksaber, it's not really a Darksaber, but you can find a black lightsaber crystal, which is really cool. All of these concepts play a huge role in where Star Wars is today. Even Galen's alias name being Starkiller is significant. Of course, this was the original last name of Luke back in the 70s, and only got canonized by Starkiller Base in the sequels, but I'd argue that most people who watched the sequels and heard Starkiller Base thought of Force Unleashed first, and not about the earliest drafts of Star Wars. Impact is a huge factor for me in this top 5. Now, this is the number 1, but I have to talk about the negatives, because it's far from perfect. Gameplay-wise, the physics are both its greatest strength and its greatest weakness. I died 90% of the time in this game from just sliding off the map or edges. I almost rage quit multiple times. The jumping in turn is imprecise and frustrating because of the physics. The sniper scout trooper can burn in hell. They are literal game breakers, and not only can you not block them, but they can ragdoll you with one shot, which either, once again, you fall off the map, or the other troops can just dogpile you while you just slide lazily on the ground. Quick time events of pressing buttons for cinematic moments are on the fence for me. They are awesome to end a boss battle with, but they're still quick time events, and they don't really take any skill. But I must say, the cinematics are dope. The love story of Juno and Starkiller is extremely forced. I mean, the first 3 missions, they say like a couple sentences to each other, and then the next mission, he risks his life to save her. And that's probably because the designers made Juno the only Imperial ever to show cleavage and have an unbuttoned uniform. Yeah, gamer dude, digital girl boobs, romance, yeah. Starkiller's transition is... Aside from that, Starkiller's transition for me is eh. The brooder killer you see 2 missions ago, from electrocuting a Sarlacc pit to a crisp, to then asking when he returns to Felucia, is there any way I can ease its pain, is kind of jarring, to say the least. I know near death will change you, but it wasn't done very well. The second half overall needed more time to breathe and flesh out Galen's transformation. Vader's plan to have him start this rebel army to distract the Emperor and destroy major Imperial targets, to do so all for the grand plan of getting them all together in one place to capture the Rebel Alliance and the Emperor's enemies, is a reach. The throwaway line they tried to do to cover this plot hole is, ship's credits, it all means nothing to the Empire. I mean, you've done a lot of damage, and you've now organized an army. It's not a great plan, Vader or Sidious. We did get a great meme out of it, though, when Vader does show up. I lied, as I have from the beginning. This last one hurts me because overall this is one of the most badass moments in Star Wars when Galen literally pulls down a Star Destroyer with the Force. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's over the top. I am obviously the big advocate for not being over the top with Star Wars powers, but in this case, it's just so freaking cool, and it's in a video game, and it's not canon anymore. So just let me live and be a hypocrite a little, okay? But the gameplay to do it is mind-numbing. You literally just pull TIE fighters out of the air with no effort as they come and shoot you, and then you pull down the ship slowly, and then more TIE fighters come, and you just go back and forth until you can pull it down. The gameplay to get there is but the ending is so dope when the ship finally hits the ground. So I know I've talked about this game a lot. I know it seems like I've talked about the negatives, but I think the positives, as you can see, far outweigh them. And I didn't get to say everything I wanted to about this game, but this is a top 5 list, and I got to keep it as concise as possible, which I already have failed at. But I am happy with this pick regardless of the flaws. Like I said, the battle between 1 and 2 really came down to playability nowadays. And honestly, it's a no-brainer. Force Unleashed plays much better than Battlefront 2 does right now. I can pick up Force Unleashed in 5 years and probably still enjoy it. While Battlefront 2, I'm not too sure. I don't really enjoy it now, so I don't think it would translate. But overall, I really hope you have enjoyed this list. I know this is a long episode, but I really wanted to flesh out why I enjoyed these games and what makes them all so special. And they've given me so many timeless memories with friends and by myself, and I really just wanted to highlight them. And I once again want to repeat, I don't think we've reached the pinnacle of Star Wars video games, and they have not reached their potential yet. None of these are perfect, but I do think a perfect Star Wars game is coming. With the bright future ahead of us and all the confirmed games we have coming, the possibility is there. I loved doing this list. I'm excited to replace some of these in the future eventually because I'm so optimistic. Cautiously optimistic, as I'd like to say. And of course, I hope you have too. And I've given you a little nostalgia boost and made you remember those weekend mornings or those late summer evenings of playing games in a galaxy far, far away. I, of course, want to hear your top 5, so when I post about this on my Instagram at @star_war_mark of balance, go follow me there. Please DM me, comment on the post, let me know what your top 5 Star Wars games are. I want to embrace debate. I want to hear why I am so wrong for not putting Battlefront 2 at number 1. I'm excited for all of it, but again, thank you for listening. Stay safe, stay healthy, and may the Force be with you. Peace.